Okay, welcome everybody. You are watching David and Jerry's Real Estate Cafe, and I'm David Grossman. My partner, business partner, Jerry Hogenhout from Canadian Investment Services is with us, and we've also got a great panel tonight. We're going to have a panel discussion, and the topic is commercial real estate. You know, people have been talking about the figures, the sales, everything's hot, but they're always talking about residential. That's the first thing that people think about. But what is happening in the commercial real estate market? Clearly, there are challenges in that marketplace with businesses shutting down, businesses that are operating from home, while others are still active. If you're an LCBO or a Shoppers Drug Mart, you are probably doing okay, or Sobeys. But many niche markets in that group are facing challenges. Where are the opportunities? What niche markets and in what cities? That is what we're going to be discussing tonight with our amazing panel, which include Ravi Thakur, commercial realtor and also mortgage agent. Ravi's actually part of my mortgage team. Perry Betel, who's actually been a good friend since we were probably about 6 years old. Perry Betel is from Harvey, Kalles. He specializes in commercial real estate. We also have Ralph Canonaco, who I've met more recently through a good friend, Navtaj Chandoki, and I see Ralph is up to some very interesting things from a perspective of land development and commercial real estate, both inside and outside of Toronto. So lots to talk about. We also have Michael Davidson, who is just driving his son somewhere, but he'll be back with us on the Zoom call shortly. First, we are going to have a word with my good friend, Jerry Hogenhout, CPA from Canadian Investment Services. He's going to do a little tax update. This is Tax Talk. Jerry, what do you have for us today?
Yeah, thanks, David. Yeah, interesting topic tonight with the commercial real estate. Looking forward to it. But just to talk taxes a little bit before we get into that. So, again, for those of you new, Tax Talk, we kind of invite you to ask questions, any tax questions that you might have. I kind of talk about some interesting things that I think are of interest to the viewers, tax related, that might have happened in the tax world in the last couple of weeks. So one thing that we've seen a lot of, not just in the last couple of weeks, but really since COVID hit, and that's, and people should become familiar with this form. It's called the form T2200. And it's a form that's been around forever. And it's a form that is used by an employee if they're required by the employer to work at home. Okay, and prior to COVID, it wasn't, you know, it certainly was common, but certainly not as common as it is now. This form allows the employee to deduct a lot of expenses that they might incur to perform their employment duties. This form is only applicable for employees, so you got to be a T4 employee. It's not for self-employed people. So how it works is, again, if your employer requires you to work at home, you're allowed to deduct those expenses. So, you know, this being a real estate show, I kind of took a real estate angle to it. We all of us, you know, that are joined here tonight, we look at real estate as an investment opportunity. You know, we want to make money with real estate. We look at it as an asset, as well as we look at it from an income flow. But this little twist looks at real estate as an expense to reduce your taxable income, to save you taxes. So, for example, with COVID, the employers are sending everybody home to work on their computers, work online. So with this form, again, T2200, we get to deduct expenses like our house, mortgage interest, insurance, any costs associated with our house. We get to deduct our car. You know, now maybe our employers are sending us to places we need to drive around more. We get to deduct our car. there's lots of expenses that get that are now becoming tax deductible because of COVID. So lots of discussions with various clients. This topic keeps coming up, and it will continue to come up, and it'll be a hot topic next tax season when all these employees are going to their employers saying, "Hey, I've heard of this form. I want to get it." And I advise all of you, if you're in that situation, or if you know of people, let them know about this form. It's a good deduction, and I use it a lot, even with incorporated clients for self-employed incorporated, where, in theory, as accountants, we want the income taxed at the low rate, and we want the expenses deducted at the higher rate. So a lot of times, with incorporated clients, we might just, again, one-person corporations. We can sign this T-20-200. It's not the owner of the company that needs to sign. It's anybody in a management position. So what I do a lot with my incorporated clients is we'll bring their income levels just to the second level. So there's four categories of tax: 20% level, 30% level, 40%, and 50%. But I can manipulate that income with the T-20-200, so we can deduct the expenses at the higher rate and pay tax on the income at a lower rate. I don't want to get too far into that, but just Google T-20-200, become aware of it, and it will save a lot of people a lot of money. Other things that we've talked about in the last couple of weeks in the tax world, a lot of talk about holding, a lot of people are looking to buy cottages using their corporate earnings. Yes, we can use our holding companies to buy cottages. Beware, and in general, I don't want to go too deep into this, but when you use a corporate asset, so if we buy a cottage in a holding company, if there's personal use of a corporate asset, there are tax implications that have to be dealt with. So I had a number of discussions with that with different people. I had a lot of chats with real estate agents. I think we have a number of real estate agents out there. There's the ability to incorporate now. Real estate corporations are coming. It's a great way for real estate agents to channel their income through a corporation, which now pays tax at 12.5%. So it's a great way to save tax. So if you're in the real estate business, you should be aware that this is coming, and that you should realize that there's a lot of tax savings by being incorporated. A few chats about, we talk about this a lot too, with dividends. We try to use dividends through corporation. A lot of questions about whether dividends can be paid to non-shareholders. No, you have to be a shareholder to receive a dividend. So again, I don't want to go into a deep dive and all that, but those are just topics that have been. Keep going, David, but we should talk about maybe switch gears.
Well, hang on, Jerry, before we switch gears. Okay, before we switch gears, Jerry, there's a question that's from DJ. Are there any tax benefit for full-time employees not incorporated but working from home? I think that's what you were talking about.
100%.
That's what you were talking about, getting that T-20-200.
In general, if your employer requires you to work at home, then you are entitled to deduct some of those expenses relating to your house, to your car. So absolutely, but you need Form T-20-200, a signed form by your employer acknowledging, confirming that you need to work at home and buy your computer and pay your own internet and pay your own phone as a requirement for your job. So yeah, there's a lot of expenses there. So once again, in summary, I encourage everybody to do a little research on that, because I can guarantee you next year at tax time, there's going to be a lot of people who aren't aware of that and are foregoing many tax deductions. And the employers in the past, they've always been somewhat reluctant. The larger the employer, the less willing they are to sign these forms, because if they do it for one, they have to do it for everybody. Coming into this next tax season next year, the employers will have no choice, because they basically told these people to go work at home. So it's a big
Gary, what about for self-employed? I mean, I was working from home before, and I'm working from home now. I'm spending more hours at home. If I want to increase what I can write off, do I need to be able to justify that I'm using more space in my house? I mean, I don't think I could write off more just by being in my office more, right?
Yes, so you have to justify anything with CRA, but it has to be reasonable. Again, as an accountant, we try to save you taxes. Okay, we all need a house. Most of us need a car. We need to eat. We like to travel. So if we can take those types of expenses and make them tax deductible, either through a corp or not through a corp, we're paying less tax, and we're using the tax system to help finance our needs. We need a house. We need food. Most of us need a car. So, but you certainly need to justify that. CRA will basically look at either the square footage of your house. So if you have a 2,000 square foot house and you have a 10 by 10 office, they're going to say you got 2,000 square foot house, you got 100 square feet. So they're going to take 1/20th of your cost. They can also do it on a per room basis, but I've seen CRA count closets as rooms. So a lot of times they try to make that to their advantage. A general rule of thumb, don't quote me on this, but I find if you up to 20% of your house, as long as it's justifiable, CRA in most cases will find that reasonable. Again, I say that with some qualification. Once you exceed 20%, you really have to have, you have to be able to prove, that you're using more than 20% of your house. But I find 15, 20%, as long as there's some reasonableness to it, they seem to be okay with that. And don't get your garage. Lots of people are storing business stuff in their garage, so you can add the garage, part of the garage, to the square footage. But CRA also, I've seen them take positions like there's 24 hours in a day, so 8 hours you're sleeping, 8 hours you're socializing, let's just hypothetically say family, and 8 hours you're working. So already we're cutting everything down to 1/3 of the expenses. Now we apply our square footage to it. So sometimes those numbers can get quite small.
Right.
Okay. So be reasonable, but it's within your rights to push it. As this is a part of the gray area of the Tax Act. As I said before, that half of the Tax Act is in black and white, written in black and white. The other half is gray, where it's subject to interpretation. And those are areas where we can benefit for the tax subject.
Okay, Jerry, before I'm just going to talk briefly about mortgages, and then we're going to get into the panel. But just quickly, Can you tell us about what you've got on their website now? Because you added this investment bank or something like that. Can you tell us?
Yeah. So last week,
I saw the website, but just explain, please, what it is.
So last session I introduced it. It's now on the website. So it's the I call it an investment bank of private capital, and it's really it's a database. It's not a bank where we're holding money or we're writing checks. It's a database for people that want to put their name in there, and we're going to create a database of people who are interested in being informed of investment opportunities. At Canadian Investment Service, we create a lot of our own investment opportunities. We go to our database, we reach out to them, see who's interested in learning more about what we're doing with our own investments. We also use that database when third parties have interesting opportunities. We'll provide that information to. There's a IPBC investment, private investment bank capital.
Okay, but
there's lots of information on there. And
okay,
sign up.
We don't share people's contact information with any third parties, right?
No, not at all. No.
Okay, very good. Okay, great.
Sorry, only unless the person is willing.
Okay. All right, that's great, Jerry. Thanks for that.
David, I got some questions for you. I mean,
okay.
Can we switch gears here into mortgages?
Yeah, go ahead.
So again, lots going on in the mortgage business. Like how are we finding lenders? Like, are they still tightening things up? What's loan to values? Are they changing those? Like what's your take on the mortgage lenders business?
with some of the recent surge or strength in the market, I think it's helped to bring a lot of lenders back towards the middle, and they've kind of calmed down a little bit. I see lenders that are still doing 80, 85%. I had one this week, a good friend of the podcast. Shout out to Terry Wallman, a great lender. He stepped up and helped us on a mortgage deal. It's supposed to close later this week. Thank you, Terry. He was offering to go to 80% on this particular deal. Tough deal. So yeah, and today I was working on a nice property today, whereas in the past I think the lenders probably would have gone to 80. Today they were, closer to 75, but we might be able to push them up a little bit. So there's still lots of money out there, and it's moving.
Interesting.
For sure. And hopefully that'll keep up. We'll see what happens. We've discussed it many times before. Time will tell when all the government subsidies run out and the mortgage deferrals stop next year. Whenever it happens, we shall see.
Well, the good news is the government keeps extending these subsidies. So
I mean,
keep printing money forever.
It's good to defer any immediate pain, but our kids and our grandkids are going to be paying for this for a long time. So, but it helps keep the blood off the street, so to speak. So, so that in that sense, it's a good thing. Let's get to our panel, Jerry. We have an amazing panel today, and I'm excited. This is a conversation I've wanted to have for a while. As I mentioned earlier, people are talking about the market, but they don't talk a lot about commercial real estate. We see the odd news flash about some large company in the States, JCPenney or whoever, going under. We're shocked. We're dismayed. Let's talk about the market here, especially in Ontario. We've got a great group of realtors, land developers, investors. I want to start with Ralph. Ralph Canonaco. He's an experienced land developer. I know recently he was raising money, looking to raise money for a development in Toronto, and then I saw. Last week he was up north and exploring and talking about mining rights and living off the grid. Ralph, you're really adventurous. Tell us what you've been up to. What do you see happening, and where are the opportunities?
Okay, so everybody, you can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so basically, my name is Ralph Canonaco. I've been in the real estate land development construction game for the last 30 years, and recently been focusing in on multifamily res commercial. As David's mentioned, we've acquired a property in downtown Toronto, which is a little outside our focus at the moment, but just to give you 5 minutes on that one, it's almost an acre of land. We're building 37 stacked townhouses. And we're in the process of closing out the raise, which is approximately just under $5 million. The response has been very good. It's Victoria Park in Danforth. And this is being done under a GPLP format where we're acting as the general partner and raising the money through the limited partnership. The net return to the investors over a 3-year time frame, because the land is approved, zoned, approved, just subject to site plan. Pre-sales anticipated for late fall, early spring. We'll give the investors about a 22 to 24% simple rate of return over the 3 years. So it's we feel that with the lack of ground-related units in the city, it was a tremendous opportunity for investors to participate. But lately, we've been focusing in on multifamily res commercial, and we have looked right outside the GTA as far as the Circle of Fire that they call Northern Ontario, which also takes into account the unorganized territories outside the urban areas. These are generally smaller towns in the 705, 519, 613 area codes of Ontario. There's roughly 500 municipalities that exist in the province, and there's people working and living in these communities just like they do here in the Greater Toronto area. You'll find that the rates of return for investors in some of these locations, which can range from 1 hour out of the city, or as let's say 45 minutes out of the city, namely Barrie, right up to a 6 hour, 7 hour drive right up to north of New Liskeard. Let's call it Iroquois Falls along the Highway 11 route, which spans from Temiskaming Shores and Thunder Bay, and everything in between. So we set up a 1 week tour, lined up a 61 building inspection program that we executed actually quite well. Tenants need 24 hours to get into their apartment, so you can see, you know, the vast areas of the building. I think it's always advisable to do that. And we were targeting buildings with low rents, and really the cap rate wasn't really a big concern. So the cap rate, even if it was in the you know, if it was mid single digits to even you know, a 3 or 4, but had the low rents, we were targeting these properties. We've had direct experience with acquiring properties like this and tripling or quadrupling the rents upon acquisition. Now, you're going to ask about, you know, tenants with respect to vacating units. In some cases, these buildings are in such disrepair that people are willing to either move to a newly renovated apartment in the existing building, or they just move altogether because the construction process usually, even on a 20 or 25 unit building where you're handling all the units, will take you a minimum of 6 to 8 months if you're delivering 5 or 6 units a month. But you're finding that as you renovate, the demand in some of these small areas, because of the lack of financing, the lack of trades, and the massive disrepair because of just the prolonged possession of some of these buildings, are great opportunities for investors coming out of the GTA. And out of the 61 units that we, or 61 buildings that we physically toured, we ended up, to date, we've tied up 5 of the 6 signbacks. There were more than 40 offers that were put out during the week that we were there. We were generating all our agreements through, you know, DocuSign to make it convenient. And we are currently in due diligence. We're in the final 1 or 2 weeks of due diligence on the first acquisitions that were done in the early part of the tour. So for all of you investors that are looking for return and interested in multifamily commercial outside the city, the opportunities are pretty much endless. And I highly recommend it, as opposed to trying to get into a heavy duty 3 cap deal here in the city of Toronto, where even a 5-plex is over $2 million. You're going to find that buildings outside the city are a fraction of that price. And specifically speaking, with respect to some of these buildings, we've been very selective in terms of our product type. We're staying away from the vinyl siding type multifamily commercial buildings, where we're targeting century buildings, brick buildings, you know, buildings that are basically, you know, have an interesting exterior and pretty much have to be either gutted or, you know, electrical, plumbing, you know, the drivetrain of the building needs to be reinstalled. And then again, some of these buildings are already set up for 1 and 2 bedroom suites, and in most cases, other than flooring and bathroom fixtures and maybe you know, a small kitchen. And don't forget, kitchens are very economical to install because kitchens in apartments are, generally speaking, no more than 8, 10, 12 linear feet, as opposed to, you know, when we were in construction and building, you know, higher end homes, it wasn't uncommon to have 50, 60, 70 feet of linear cabinets that you were putting into a home. So it's for $500 or $600, you're getting a brand new kitchen. Now I found something interesting, which kind of shocked me actually. We just tied up a 26-unit building in Cobalt, Ontario, which is about an hour's drive north of North Bay on Highway 11. Now there's four towns here. There's Cobalt, North Cobalt, Hallaberry, and New Liskeard. This little town is part of Temiskaming Shores, which is on Temiskaming Lake. It is an agricultural-based community, and we, to our surprise, some of the units were vacant in this particular building. It had gone through a roof repair, and there were some vacancies that we were able to see. And my partner and I were asking about the appliances. And it just so happens in this particular town with bachelor and junior 1-bedrooms, most of the tenants bring in their own appliances. So if you're budgeting a reno and you've got $1,500 or $1,800 in your budget for, stoves and fridges, in this particular case, the tenants bring their own appliances. The other thing that we found with this particular community, and you've got to check all of your communities when you go out of town, is that there are affordable housing nonprofit groups and also mental health institutions that supply tenants to, multifamily buildings. These are outpatient programs. These tenants are generally supported by government loans or government grants, if you will, a form of welfare. In some cases, people are disabled. And we found that in this particular building in Cobalt, if the landlord did not call the check issuing office on the day that the money was due, the tenant wasn't responsible for calling that number in, and the check wouldn't be issued. So you have to be on point with your property management as well. So these are some of the little nuances you're going to find in some of the towns. And on the commercial side, if anybody's venturing into, single tenanted commercial retail tenants or single pad buildings, whether it's a burger shop or a fast food restaurant or maybe a gas station site. Again, endless opportunities. We have professional consultants that do retail studies all the time for these type of ventures. And again, this is just a matter of shopping the opportunity to the majors. And you'll be surprised to find that you're able to secure some excellent credit tenants. And with credit tenants, you're going to get excellent financing terms. And usually they're the most reliable tenants. And it's something that you could potentially consider for a small emerging town. Now, we've stuck to towns that are on major thoroughfares or, close to where the, we have a saying in our office that you don't buy anything beyond 1,000, feet of a subway or nothing further than a mile off an interchange. And you know what, it's the same in a small town. You get into the major sections, you got to look for the best retail locations, which are basically on the north side of a street, left to the light. You've got to look for small urban hubs. But this is information that you can easily access from the municipality. And again, sometimes, your basic instinct in terms of gravitating to an A location is also something that, if you see enough sites, you're going to automatically spot them when you see them. So lots of opportunities all along 17 from Sudbury is a very expensive market now. I'm not sure if anybody's been looking up there, but you're going to see the cap rates have dramatically dropped. Prices are factored in at even below cap rate level, like they're negative cap rates, they call them, because cost of money is generally 3%. And some of these buildings in Sudbury, notwithstanding that the rents are lower, are being offered at 1.5 to 2.5. Now, the ones that need rehabbing obviously are a little higher, but generally speaking, the market is pretty tight. Now,
okay, Ralph, I'm gonna jump in here. Let's come back to you. We're losing your connection a little bit, but we're going to come back to you. And there's also some questions for you. People are asking questions, which is great. So we encourage people to ask questions. But let's bring in some of the panelists. That was a very good overview. We appreciate that. We'll come back. I want to jump over to Perry. Perry Betel, Harvey Kalles Realtor, who works the Toronto market quite a bit. Perry, what are you seeing in the Toronto market with respect to commercial real estate in terms of whether prices are moving? Are they going up, or are they going down? Are there a lot of vacancies? Are there opportunities?
Well, there's a whole bunch of different commercial classes that I deal in. And so there's the multi-res and the retail. Those are, I guess, people's major focuses when it comes to investment. Beyond those, there's an industrial investment opportunities and even medical buildings and the likes of that. So there's quite a few different opportunities, and each one has its pros and cons. And realistically, with regards to, we'll say, the safest play would be multi-res. And in terms of the GTA, there are more coming aboard. So I don't know that the asking prices and the sellers' motivation is such that there's deals to be had. But having said that, there's a lot more opportunities out there, and you can be selective and kind of push the envelope with the offers and obtain some pretty good deals out there. But of course, like Ralph said, the cap rates on the multi-res are low. Having said that, the big picture is, what can you do to increase the rents? So, if you're looking at a building that's been around for a while and can use some renovations, buying it at what would be the average probably in GTA would be probably like a 3.5 cap, maybe $275,000 a unit. And that's not bad, because ultimately, even the big boys that buy on that basis will buy 3 caps and 2.5 caps, as long as they can project out a 5 cap at some point down the road once they've increased rents and done some renovations and factored all of that in. So that's a real good opportunity because it's completely safe. Rents are coming down, and that's part of what's generating some more assets on the table. So that's obviously something to factor in. But I think, long term, you're going to see some pretty secure income from that asset class. In terms of the retail, there's definitely the COVID factor where, you've got many tenants not paying rent, like Dave said, other than the banks, the guys that have been open, Dollarama's always a good tenant. But if you've got a mom and pop restaurant, if you've got a nail shop, they're not doing well, and they probably weren't paying rent. There's the government program that came in, so the landlords are usually collecting the 25% from the tenant, 50% from the government, and they're out of pocket 25% at this point in time. So there's opportunities there, because they've been basically saying real estate's dying before COVID, and that was like a Walmart effect and then after that, Amazon. But from good GTA property, you'll always find tenants. Once you've got a good location, the tenants are there. And there's always, there was a time in industrial where they said, we're not manufacturing anything in Canada, and the asset is a bad asset to own and you should dump it. And those were the days when it was $20, $30 back in the mid 90s a foot. So it was at its low at that point. And, now it's one of the better asset classes. There's high demand for it. The sale prices are going at $200 plus a foot, and the rents are $8, $9. So, I kind of see contrarian as the way to go for retail as well, as one example only. And, there's not many as good, but the, with regards to the cannabis, that's filling up a lot of spaces. As a realtor, every commercial realtor is getting calls all day and night for cannabis clients. You've got to be selective. You've got to know what to ask for, but that's definitely taking up some of the slack. There's always the fast food. There's always nail salons. Now there's a lot more professionals. You can get doctors, lawyers, dentists. So, I mean, the streetscape is changing, but I really feel like one way or the other, there'll be income to be earned, and the asset class is good. The upside in having the retail, because without it in the GTA, it's very expensive, and probably there's better options. But with the upside of redevelopment potential, when you're in GTA, it's frequent that whether you're at a corner or whether you're at a mid block, if you're on a good main street, an avenue, then there's a great potential that you'll be able to redevelop, whether it's in Scarborough Kingston Road, whether it's on Eglinton Avenue East, up and down. There's different heights, different densities, so it's good to do your research. And I have all of that in terms of having planners and people that I can rely on for giving me the information. The idea is buying streets that have high density and heights, and some are 4-story, some are 6-story, some are 12-story, and as of right, and then some of these you can push to 30 stories if, again, using like an Eglinton Avenue East reference where the LRT is going. Those are going to be 20 to 30 story towers up and down Eglinton Avenue East. So when you buy something now, it might be a little too late on that street, but even then, there as you come to Kennedy, there's properties for sale, and the cap rates aren't great. Again, you're at 3-4%, but the upside on that retail on a long-term hold makes up for those low cap rates. And of course, for tax purposes, if you're paying full income tax on income versus not having the same income, writing off the mortgage payments and not having much to declare until the end game when you sell and pay a capital gains on the sale at much lower tax rate, it's tax efficient.
Okay, very, very interesting, Perry. Thank you very much for that. I find that particularly interesting, but I mean, it certainly makes sense that, in some areas in Toronto, and the avenues, despite potential vacancies and whatnot, there's still demand because of the long-term redevelopment potential. A very interesting point. I want to bring in Ravi now, and then Michael, stay with us. We appreciate your patience there. We see you driving your car. Drive carefully, by the way. Let's bring Ravi into the conversation. Ravi Thakur is both a real estate agent and a mortgage agent. He actually is. He's on my mortgage team. So we've had an opportunity to work together on some interesting deals. One of the reasons I was really excited to bring Ravi into the team is because of his interest in commercial real estate and some of the work that he'd been doing. Ravi, I know, is also very interested in real estate outside of Toronto in particular. Tell us what you've been working on, Ravi. I know you got a project in Barrie and elsewhere.
Sure. Thank you, David, for the opportunity, and happy to be part of this discussion. I think Rav and Perry has pretty much covered the Ontario, right? The GTA. so to say, just to re-echo what Rav was pinpointing, there are great opportunities. And in my case, the research, with a little bit of background, I served in corporate over 20 years in financial district, being a IT project and program manager, dive into full-time realty and the commercial side and some of the opportunities I saw. And that's where I'm basically working towards for the second chapter of my life. Multi-residential, as many asset classes, definitely is very risk averse, as all the expert panelists have echoed. And this is something which are very well insulated, despite the unprecedented the COVID scenarios we haven't seen in our lifetime, and I'm seeing some excellent opportunities. I have done some due diligence and some data points. As Raf has been pointing, going outside of the GTA, there are two asset classes, like, how you want to investigate and invest into a high value asset. Cap rates are low, as Perry has been pointing in the GTA. But if you go out, there are golden nuggets to be picked up. It all depends on the eyes of the beholder, how you see and what kind of a vision you're carrying. I have seen and I've met with investor who see within their comfort zone. They're looking only 1.5 hours drive down, David. So they will get what is there. Already those properties are basically in high demand. So the ask price, the listing prices are going up, reducing the cap rates. But when you go outside of the comfort zone, that's where you start to find the things, really. And if you can pluck those things and you are really invest your time to basically stabilize those assets, they are kind of you can get them on a bargaining price because they're very steady in terms of the rental flow, in terms of tenant profile, and there are opportunities there to be made. I'm also, David, involved in some of the land developments. You pinpointed not too far the Barry. Barry has done excellently well, not only from a residential uptick, from the June number, and also from a rental, vacancies and rental market absorption. Barry is an excellent place, not too far. Right now, I'm working also on a multi-residential asset class, 50 units, which is almost on a SPA level within a 2-month horizon. And we are basically looking very positive for this one. The average rental for this property has been coming up to 1800s. So we are seeing a lot of opportunities in this projects. Using your forum, I want to put out the word, not competing with Rolf, who was offering a lot of better ROI, but this is a very good opportunity. Also, people who want to dip their feet with 8.5 kind of ROI with profit sharing. And the idea is just to hold these assets for, for some long term. They want to continue. I'd be happy to share that opportunity. Aside from there, Western Canada, looking so many opportunities, especially into the Golden Horseshoes area. I'm seeing a lot of opportunities into the Collingwood, the Wasaga site, reason I'm working on a approved community of 500 homes, as well as I'm also working on a opportunity into the Western where you go 89 Mount Forest site. Long and short, this is one pet peeve of mine, David. So I'm focusing, and I can see many people can take a lot of advantage of this, as this can really generate a passive income stream for them and create a lot of opportunities for wealth generation.
Okay, excellent. Well, I know you do great work for your clients, as do all the panelists, and we're going to share everybody's contact information shortly. We have some questions which we will get to momentarily. I want to bring Michael into the conversation. Michael, you're still with us, I hope. Michael Davidson is with Remax Commercial. And hopefully we haven't lost him. He's been waiting by. There he is. Okay, we just got to unmute you there, Michael. And tell us what your. I see you got a nice streetscape there and a little bathroom behind you in case things run a little bit long. We appreciate you being with us, Michael. Tell us what's your take on the on commercial real estate opportunities, challenges. What's your experience been like these last few months?
Yeah, thank you, first of all, David, for having me join you in your panel. And thank you for everybody else for sharing their views and thoughts and experiences. Mine, I'm here from the Eglinton Park on Roselawn. My son is back playing baseball, and so sign of summer when the boys are playing ball. And, you know, I think the Blue Jays are coming back to the field this week. So, you know, I'm talking to the city of Toronto, telling me that they're hoping to get back to some of their answering machines or their phones by September. But everything is going online and from home. And so workers can work from home. I think I heard earlier, and this format is changing everything from the retail to the office to the industrial. I think every sector has its nuances, and I'm doing a bit of everything as well as Perry. I'm doing retail, industrial, not so much multi-residential because it's just been such a tight market that I haven't really spent a lot of my emphasis, my time on multi-res. But I have seen the markets over the last 2 years change, and some of the sellers have started to see the change in this market that they might not have seen in 2019, where prices just weren't where they were in 2017 and 2018, because 2017 was a stellar year, and I think prices, from what I'm hearing, haven't really gone up a whole lot, and I think it's got somewhat to do with appreciation on where you can see how much rents are going to be going up, and I've just done a couple of leases recently for some retail quasi like called flex space that was 20% less than what we might have been able to get because we dropped our prices, and we aimed to get the spaces rented out, and they had some healthy increases in the year 2 and 3 and going up to years 4 and 5 and so I think from what I'm hearing, the experts tell me that like 2 to 3 years from now we're going to see those cap rates return to where they were. But for now, those cap rates will be going up in this GTA market. So for those people who are looking for investments in the city and they'd like to have a tenant for the property that is paying a rent, that they can finance the property, I think that's a discussion that's going to have to be looked at on a week-to-week, month-to-month basis on how the underwriters are going to be looking at those deals to approve buyers for properties that have questionable income. But if there's anything that I can say from my experience right now is that there's movements from some tenants on their space that they no longer need. They're subleasing space. Some people who own their properties, like I deal a lot with a lot of business owners, David, and so they are looking at surplus space that their staff isn't using, and they're looking at how they can rent that out. So we're having strategies, and I'm getting back to what I studied in school, which is doing business plans and doing business plans and doing the real estate component of those marketing plans, because we have to reanalyze our strategies now on how we use our space, how space is being used. So from a practical leasing standpoint, which is what I do my bread and butter in, the world is very different, and the use of space has to be more creative. When I got into business in 2002, space was being repurposed. It was being the layouts of the spaces were changing. Their doors, entrances were changing. A lot of the lobbies and a lot of the office buildings were being gentrified and upgraded from these more industrial sort of feeling buildings that were in the downtown core and now a lot of those buildings have turned into A quality space at rental rates that are double what they were 20 years ago. And now, how sustainable are those rents going to be is the question. So there's a lot of uncertainty, but one thing's for sure is I think when we look at prices 10 years from now, they're going to be double what they were last year, and things with rental rates will return and as the vaccine comes back. So a little bit of a muddy water situation for the next 6 months as some companies are just sort of taking a pause, hold. Let's just manage for the time being until January. And but people have to get to work. People have to pay their bills. People are going to start to feel a pinch once their CERB runs out. And safety measures will mean that restaurants that no longer have the patio that they can sit out on are going to have to be inside with tables further apart. They're not going to be turning as many checks and may not be selling as many bottles of wine. Service will take longer to take. Service, everything will take longer, and you're going to have to plan your moves, meaning you're going to have a strategy. You're going to have to allow for things to take a little longer than they did before. But I am hearing that the city of Toronto is giving permits very quickly and with a lot less of a hassle, which is good news if this is true, to get tenants moving, to get spaces purposed used, getting spaces repurposed. Bylaws are being looked at to help be flexible on those things, and some of those strategies will hopefully get things fast-tracked for business owners to use their space and to get their space rented out if somebody wants it. So I think my view on the market is you should be investing in industrial. I think multi-residential, if you can find it, is good. I'm working in markets like Etobicoke that have all asset classes out there along the subway lines. Good quality locations are going to be taken by tenants coming in from like maybe the States, or some companies that are planning moves here to take prime locations that are being walked away from by some tenants that you're hearing in the news. Good corner locations. So yeah, it's a tenants market. I think there's opportunities for landlords who are seeing that this is a long-term situation, that they need to be flexible and look at making sure that they're covering their expenses, and their rents will come. I think the biggest question that in my mind is that how do you underwrite deals, and how do you get sales done on what kind of equity basis does the buyer have to have? How creative can you be is really the question. Yeah.
All right. Very good insights, Michael. And you've also inspired me. I'm looking at you sitting outside, and I'm thinking that, Jerry, we should be doing this this bi-weekly show from outside or from a patio or somewhere. So good.
The same thing. So
good for you.
Opened up now, so maybe we find a patio, we can do it from there.
Yeah, that's we.
I got it. If I can I jump?
There's lots of parks we can do it outside.
Go ahead, Jerry.
Question. So I'm just curious what the panel thinks, because we've seen our federal government just spend unprecedented amounts of money, which has to be dealt with in some manner. Obviously, it can't all come from property taxes. I think John Tory said he'd have to raise property taxes in Toronto by 60% to cover just this year's deficit. We know he can't raise it that much, but obviously some of that is going to come from property tax increases. And I've seen in the past where municipalities, it's easier for them to increase the commercial and industrial mill rate instead of the residential. Raising the residential mill rate is more politically suicide than the commercial and industrial. If that's true, I'm just curious what the panelists think. If they see that happening, that the commercial and industrial property tax rate goes up, obviously that's not going to help the value with these buildings. And also I see, as we all know, I look at the paper pushing industries, like myself as an accountant. With technology the way it is, I mean, we can do so much in such small spaces that a lot of these paper pushing industries, accountants, mortgages, insurance, we just don't need the space that we used to. So there will be a decline in the demand for that type of space, which should, I would think, affect pricing. I'm hearing a lot of optimism from our panel as far as the commercial and industrial real estate. So I'm just curious if they have comments on either property tax increase concerns, demand based on everybody now basically working virtually much more than they used to. Any thoughts or comments? Or David, maybe you got a thought.
Let's address what Ralph is sitting forward in his chair. Ralph, do you want to comment on, and then maybe Perry? Go ahead.
Well, listen, as far as property taxes, we've always come across tax issues with, even in the construction development business, where we were caught in a cycle where levies were being increased. Do I like it? No. Is it necessary? Most likely. Obviously, somebody's got to cover this deficit on a go-forward basis. There's got to be give somewhere. But I guess at the end of the day, and I hate to say it this way, but if everybody's all wet and we're all, incurring the cost equally in a particular sector, then in some cases, we have no choice but to accept it. Obviously, appeals are, a great strategy to try to minimize the impact if they are passed. But generally speaking, it puts more pressure on rents to go up. So on the multifamily side, again, we're obviously aware of all the legislation and the restrictions with respect to rent control, but we're always looking at our different assets vis-a-vis looking for improvements and try to create more value add for the buildings, so that if you're asking $100 more for a particular unit, it more than covers any of the incidental increases that the city's trying to pass on. So that's kind of our position.
Anybody else want to comment on that, Perry?
Yeah. I mean, I would say historically, taxes go up for commercial properties more than residential, and because owning an asset isn't liquid, you're a target for tax increases. I mean, if someone put a big increase on dividend income, you might sell some stocks before it happened. But here you're not that liquid, so you're going to get stuck with some of that. But I think that maybe the good news, and there's very little about COVID, would be that the on the retail end, everyone's getting hurt. The tenants especially, and the argument would be that as a landlord, you're gonna end up, the tenant pays those increases in property taxes. Most leases are net, and the tenant pays it, assuming that they're still around. They're going to be paying it. If you need to get a new tenant, then it's possible that a tenant would look at the situation as, what's my gross rent, and if the taxes are up, then you may be getting a little less rent. Having said that, though, I think that because of the pain on the street, I think the government may look towards estate taxes or capital gain tax increases, and I think this time around any increase to the commercial tax base will be more limited, and I think those trial balloons are going to be raised on some of these other scary things as well, but not related to commercial real estate. It'll be equally painful for most people, but I don't think that it's going to all come on to commercial real estate. And it has happened in the past that way, but I think, with COVID, I don't think they want to pile on.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Perry. Let's get to some of the many questions.
A lot of questions here, David.
Yeah, folks, we're going to address your questions that you've written in chat, but ideally, if you have questions, please, in the future, try and type them under the Q&A area. That way we can dismiss them as we answer them, because otherwise it can be a little overwhelming when they're all piling up. But we're definitely going to address. So there was one question from Chuck, a couple questions from Chuck, and then somebody else asked it for all the panelists, and that is, what's the minimum investment if somebody wants to invest with you? We'll get to that in a little bit. But first, a question is, what major retail tenants are in the Temiskaming, and what rates do they pay? And then also, I think as well, this was for Ralph, was does that 1,000 feet, was it, I don't know if it was 1,000 feet away from a subway apply to commercial properties or only or is that residential apartment buildings too? Ralph, comments?
Okay, with respect to Temiskaming, if we're talking about commercial rents, believe it or not, a lot of the tenants in that area are paying, maybe as on par with some of the city locations here, save and except for maybe a 10% discount. So the principles of developing commercial in some of these smaller towns are pretty much the same, because traffic counts are the same, income levels in Temiskaming are very, very high. And I got to tell you, we one of the projects that we tied up in Temiskaming, which is in New Liskeard, which is the Tri-City of Temiskaming Shores. New Liskeard is one particular area, other than Cobalt, that I talked about before. And we're budgeting, and this is a quasi-retirement building, a one-bedroom, 800 square foot unit will be at $1,600 a month. And we've got already 80 people on a list on a building of only 40 units. And that's only the work that the previous seller has done. We haven't even done any intense marketing yet, but it's going to be a spectacular 2-story school conversion, which we are starting to specialize in because the province is riddled with redundant schools all over the place. With respect to the boundaries of subway stations, or interchanges. The rule of thumb is 1 mile from any interchange. So a 401, a 402, the new 417 coming to Vaughan, 407, doesn't matter. 1 mile from an interchange will capture all your commercial uses, truck stops, restaurants, gas bars, you name it, right? And then with respect to subways, anything with 1,000 feet of a subway station, is considered, in my view, very prime. So, and it doesn't matter if it's res or commercial, because a lot of these subway stations now are being developed for mixed-use projects, and with no parking, which is a huge savings on the superstructure of a condo if you're not having to get into the ground. And we've done 7 of those buildings in the city, almost 2 million square feet. So we understand the excessive cost of parking, the delays, getting in the ground, starting your forming, coming out, all the shoring that goes along with it. And obviously the responsibilities that you have with crane easements. And I can go into an hour of discussion on cranes, but that's in a nutshell, those are the parameters.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Ralph. There's a question here. I'm going to put this out to the panelists. Whoever may have a comment on it, if you do, from Terry. 2841 Lawrence Avenue, Scarborough Strip Plaza at Brimley, now available for sale under power of sale. $5.6 to $6 million range, potential rezone, development, land assembly, question mark. Anybody aware of the property? Any comments?
I'm not aware of the property, David, but I've seen a lot of trades over the last couple of years of properties like that have been converted into townhouses. So plazas are being looked at for their land, ancillary land value, or even to rebuild for multi-use. So it could make sense if they can get some idea from the planning department that they would support the rezoning.
Okay, well, Terry's put his email address there. So if one of you guys wants to.
So is this property on the market now, or it's coming to market? It's a power of sale.
It says now available for sale under power of sale. So, but
I'm not aware of it, but I'm interested.
All right, so you've got Terry's email address there. You may want to reach out to him. Another question from Terry: is there specific cities within the greater Hamilton area? I think that's the GTHA is Hamilton area, I believe, that have commercial properties increasing in value and specific cities within the greater Hamilton area that have commercial properties decreasing in value? Is there more upside in buying dilapidated properties, in gutting, refurbishing, or in rezoning and new build? Anyone?
I sell a lot in Hamilton, and I guess it's a multi-faceted question, but generally speaking, Hamilton is going up. So the properties that I deal with in Hamilton, I've kind of been asset managing, and we usually got mom and pop tenants, and now it's no problem getting the chains in there, and that has always been a problem in the past. And if you don't have national tenants, you can still get great rents, and it's actually easier to put a rent deal together. There's less lawyers, less time, easier to get a first and last and start getting your rent after a month or two of free rent. So I love the mom and pop tenants, but there's a lot of security and upside to having a national tenant. And that was pretty tough in Hamilton with few exceptions. Now, I feel like on that end, the market is up. Fixing up upsides for doing renovations is always the case. So, if you can buy something that needs work, you're going to end up having a big upside. I would say, just personal to me, is within Hamilton, I try to look at the areas that are already good. Everyone's got this idea of finding an up and coming area, in quotes. And I think the values in Hamilton are already there. And if you're looking at an area that's boarded up and not a lot of retail that's thriving, to buy now, assuming that you're not paying all cash for this deal, you've got to get financing. It's very difficult, and you've got to carry financing. It's very difficult. It sounds good on paper, but I think it's still location. So you buy a building in a decent location in Hamilton, doesn't have to be the best, but a decent location, and you spend your time and money finding something that needs work, and you put that work in, you're gonna end up the same as a multi-res building. You're gonna end up getting more rent, getting better tenants, and having a great asset. You can refinance, you can take out money, all things that you can't do in Toronto that easily, you'd be able to do in good locations in Hamilton. So that's kind of just my suggestion. Is within Toronto, anything goes. Once you get into the outer markets, same as Ralph said, I mean, pick good locations, and Hamilton is no different. You got to pick good locations right in Hamilton. It could be on the mountain, could be downtown, but if you're driving through an area that's got half the stores boarded up, I don't see that as up and coming. I see that as something where you're going to need to pay all cash and wait a long time before you see any return. It's a gamble. And real estate, there's no 100% certainty that you're going to make money. But in general, if you buy right, as Michael said, 10 years down the road, you're going to be doubling your money. And that's, but when you do something where the area is looking really rough, that may not be the case. It may be a 20-year hold, and that may not pay off.
Okay, very good. Yeah.
There's a question here for you. Jason says, does anyone know if you build 3 townhouses with 2 basement apartments, will you be able to buy it as a 5-plex? So that's a question for you, David, I think.
Right. Okay. So if you're going to have different titles, he's saying if he severs the lot and each townhouse would have its own title, normally a lender is going to look at that as, you're financing a duplex, and a single family home, something to that effect. There are exceptions to that where some of our commercial lenders will look at putting a blanket over multiple properties or financing a group of properties. So it is possible to look at it from a commercial perspective, and a lender would finance the whole group of properties, but normally they would look at it like a duplex, and a single family dwelling from a financing point of view.
David,
Thank
you there?
Yes.
Can I make a comment on Terry Wellman? Because he was talking about Hamilton, right? So,
Yeah.
okay, this is a bit of a conflict of interest for me, but I'm going to just suggest it. We kind of break up the GTA into the triangles, not to be confused with the Bermuda Triangle, but triangles. So I'll give you an example: 400, 17, 11. You go to the west, you've got Sarnia, Windsor, London. Then you go to just outside Hamilton, you've got, Hamilton, 401 to Woodstock, back around along the 403. I think the hottest little town out there today, bar none, on a major highway is Paris, Ontario. There's explosive activity happening in this area. And I think you're probably not even looking at incremental percentages. You're looking at multiples as the market tightens up. Construction has already started out there. And you're going to see that it's probably a bigger bang for the buck than a Hamilton area, which is kind of, a big metropolitan area now, but, saturated with investors. So cap rates have been dropping. So we're bullish on Paris. With respect to the question on, is there bigger upside on zoning versus gutting and refurbishing and restabilizing? We, hands down, from a developer's point of view, we run these pro formas back and forth. Land's got a finite upside with respect to, the doubling up or tripling up of densities, which is correlated back to pro forma, which gives you a bigger output. We find that refurbishing or gutting, if you will, repositioning, stabilizing, can double, if not triple, multiply the value of the asset if you buy the right building. So it's hands down from our perspective that the refurbishing route, repositioning is the better option.
I think.
Hey, Ralph, sorry, can I ask Ralph a question? Because
Go ahead,
curious that you're bullish on Paris. So that must mean you're bullish on that whole area, Cambridge, over to the 401. Is it just the area?
Yeah, that whole triangle, the Kitchener-Waterloo, Cambridge area is a fantastic location. But again, it's almost like before I would invest there in terms of upside, I would rather put my money in Barrie. Barrie is the new Vaughan for Metro. You take the Fifth Side Road into Tottenham. These are direct links into these communities, a little further than I'd like them to be, because I like to stay within my 1 kilometer rule off the interchange. But Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge has got already a lot of value packed into the purchase of your investment up front. So the emerging market is, I got to tell you, Woodstock, for example, you can't even get a rental there. People they've got buses. The employers got buses bringing people to work in Woodstock. Woodstock is probably 105% leased out. In other words, there's more demand than supply. It's probably time to build there. As a builder, that's what we're trained to look at. And it's probably time there because people aren't turning over the resale inventory to allow an investor to reposition an asset. Paris is a brand new little town. I think once you start to see the homes emerge off the highway, you're looking at $100,000 to $200,000 a house in terms of comparable value, because people are all about. I've built in the outlining areas for 25 years. They're all show me markets. If you can put up the inventory, a comparable house from a set of plans versus seeing it built and occupied, there's a 20% lift in the asset once it's complete. And now with a shortage of inventory everywhere, you might even see higher incremental values than that. And that's all coupled with the fact that they're undersupplied as far as rental. So, you look at Jane and 7, which is the new it's comparable to the uptown downtown corridor of Yonge and Sheppard, where we did a condo. The skyline in Vaughan will forever be changed in the next 5 to 10 years. And the 407 bypass, which was slated for 10 years from now, is all being fast-tracked to allow that bypass to happen from 400 to Highway 7 so people don't get clogged up in York Region. All of these areas are super loaded. They're undervalued as these infrastructures materialize and houses are getting become a reality and interchanges are built. You'll start to see multiples. But my bet is on Paris. And again, we break up these 401 highways into triangles so that we can keep monitoring and repositioning our investment strategies.
Thank you very much, Ralph. Ravi, did you want to add something?
Hey, Ralph, what's his take on Brentford? There's a lot going on there too. And also in the Orangeville side.
Yeah, I agree.
I love Bradford, but we've got a land position in Paris, and I kind of said that it was it's a bit of a conflict of interest. But if you see the town in terms of its even the mixed use buildings on the main streets, which are primarily century buildings and brick and stone, you'd have pride of ownership. You could pick up 4 stores with 5, 10 apartments in that little town. You know what? In the next year or two, you're not going to be able to touch it. So, sure, Brantford, sure, we're bullish on Brantford, but Paris is just that much cheaper. We find Woodstock overpriced at the moment, so we're kind of concentrating on Paris. And all these areas are in the way we turn. We also do a lot of work in the U.S., so we're active with multifamily buildings along the eastern seaboard. We find that any city that has momentum, we consider these pressure centers. Anything that can be a derivative or a satellite community to a pressure center is going to give you yield. You just look at Barrie. In the next few years, it will outprice itself. So guess what? People will start to move right up into Tate Township, Port Severn. They're going over to Brecon on the other side of Lake Simcoe, up in Rama. All these areas are a benefactor of the equity that's pushing people further and further out, and they have to drive to qualify. And you find that these little towns have all the amenities. They're emerging. All the biggest land developers in the city of Toronto today were in these Brampton, Markham, Richmond Hill, Newmarket locations, 50, 40, 30 years ago. And you know what? They really didn't do that much work other than they were patient enough to wait for the city to, mature. And what you're going to see in Vaughan and in Markham is going to be unprecedented. Brampton, same thing. Oakville, unbelievable. Burlington, Hamilton, anything within a stone's throw of these municipalities are going to be also very good. If you're fortunate enough to buy in these city centers, you're obviously going to multiply your money. And then when you go out into the little satellite towns off the highway, if you look at all the master plans, Dave and Nav from Prague, Canada, we go over these at some of our meetings, and we talk about strategies with respect to official plans and future infrastructure. You can see it right for yourself. It's just a matter of timing it and being patient enough to wait. But tons of money to be made. I don't think the time has been better, in my words.
Sure. Lastly, David, if you may allow another insight on the Dufferin and the Bruce side. We have seen the Shelburne has really grown into a big community. There's a new development happening on the Dundalk, which are also thoroughfare on the Highway 10, connecting to the Wasaga side as well as to the Owen side corridor. And then they have intersection from Guelph, the Highway 6, which goes, all towards that side. But Rolf, if you have taken your compass that side.
I got to tell you that whole Georgian Bay triangle, again, it's another triangle that we look at, is extremely attractive for retirees, not only through Wasaga Beach, Collingwood, but Meaford, Thornbury, right up into Tobermory. But most recently, you take the Kitchener-Waterloo, Cambridge market. They don't go to that area. They go basically to Grand Bend, Goderich area. These are some of the most spectacular beaches that you've ever seen. And if you take that 402 highway and you get into even places like Strathroy and Wallaceburg. If anybody's ever been through these towns, Lambton Shores, these are excellent locations that can't be replicated. But I got to tell you, I don't know how much longer it's going to last, because, you know, when I was doing my Northern Ontario tour, you know, I got to tell you, we weren't the only ones at the inspections. There were a lot of investors. When I mean a lot, you know, there were at least, you know, the appointments to show the apartments were all orchestrated by the brokers. You know, we weren't the only group at these openings. It was just incredible. You're in a little town like Matisse, which, if you look on your map, is just a stone's throw from Hearst, Ontario, and you've got people from the city of Toronto looking at buildings in these locations. Like, it's just incredible on investor interest. Now, my question is, you know, we usually deal with the local credit unions in these small towns. So, you know, the usual strategy is you open up a bank account, you get to know your manager, and then you come in and you show them what your experience level is, and that, you know, that helps. And you try to get some local support for financing. But I got to tell you, I believe that a lot of these investors are on the ball and doing the same thing. I just find it, you know, amazing.
Okay, very good. Ralph, there's a question here from Terry. This is a question I find very interesting. Be curious what the experts think of this one. The WeWork concept, the co-working, which has been exploding in the last few years. Impacts of COVID on co-working and WeWorking type spaces. Any comments?
Well, I can give you one. We own a building on Wilson Avenue near Weston Road. We've got, it's not a big space. It's not a WeWork or a Regis, but it's 6,000 square feet. So we have 40 different workstations in that building. Can I just tell you that we are 30% occupied today? So that tells you a lot of people, obviously COVID, you know, the risk of being close to people is obviously an issue. But we've been finding that they haven't even been coming back as soon as we had thought. And the ones that are there, you know, obviously for whatever reason are coming to continue to work at the building. But the rest of them have been accustomed to working at home. So I'm not an expert in office space like that. But we did create these share spaces to fill a void, and it was working well for a while. But lately, it has not.
So it's really COVID related that dropped that occupancy rate?
You know what, I don't know if it's the cost. Like, obviously these spaces, right? You don't need a personal guarantee. You give us the first and last month's rent. We're not taking any security deposit. You get a key to the place. You can come in 7/24. There's a coffee machine there. You got your little space. You got a filing cabinet. You know what? I don't know. I think it has to be COVID. It must be, in my view.
Yeah, I would certainly think so. Absolutely. I mean, you know, you have the same concerns in any of these places that you would have anywhere with respect to social distancing, especially if you have a shared work area where somebody comes in, works, and then picks up and, you know, leaves or whatever. The area needs to be cleaned and sanitized. So for a business meeting, okay, you want to meet somebody somewhere, you need to meet them somewhere. It's still a professional thing. But, you know, now in the summer, I think probably people are looking to patios or outdoor spaces as much as they can. You know, this is the sign of the times. There was a question that applied to each panelist talking about investing. So since we've only got about, you know, another 5 minutes or so left, maybe it's a good opportunity just to kind of go around the horn. Everybody just kind of do their final pitch on what they're looking for. We'll put up the phone numbers one more time. Somebody wants to invest with you. What kind of investors are you looking for, or clients? Let's start off with Ralph, and then we'll go to Michael Davidson.
Okay. Well, typically speaking, if we're creating an offering memorandum, we typically, just let me give you my example from Victoria Park in Danforth. We're allowing investors to come in with registered or unregistered funds. You can become an AI or a non-AI, which basically means an accredited investor or not accredited investor. And we're actually our minimum on that deal was about 10,000. But we're now looking at some crowdfunding opportunities where you can come in with as little as $500 to $1,000. We've got a digital platform alliance or strategic alliance with an investor or with an exempt market dealer, and we're looking at those formulas. But if we're going with just a group of us, a typical investment would be somewhere in the range of about $250,000.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Ralph. Appreciate you sharing all your insights today very much. Thank you. Let's go over to Michael Davidson. We can't, oh, we got to.
Hi, David.
Yeah, hi, Michael.
All right. My ideal client is a small business owner or a high net, also a accredited investor, also anyone who's looking at doing like infill projects. We've got a lot of opportunities here in the GTA for to the demand for housing. So that's going to continue, as I think another panelist mentioned. The supply of housing currently is not meeting demands. So that means we're going to be working through that absorption over the next couple of years, and those people who are bold will be rewarded the most over the long term. So I think prime locations, high traffic, that's what's going to be getting the best rents. And so I'm pretty much working with all types of business owners.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Michael, and thanks for sharing your knowledge with us today. We really appreciate it. Ravi, over to you. What's your ideal client, and what kind of investment does somebody need to make if they want to invest in commercial real estate with you?
Sure, there are optimum amount of opportunity depend upon the the qualification of the investor, whether what is the risk appetite is for more savvy investor who understand the marketplace and especially the asset classes. I would recommend them. This very opportunity I'm working is a good way to start. We are basically soliciting and encouraging people to come both as a accredited or non-accredited with a 50,000 kind of investment with a guaranteed return and profit sharing. If people who like to take baby steps, definitely, some of the single family homes are a good, places, they are like to invest. I do also deal in pre-construction. Some people see them the equity appreciation perspective. So that's another area to look at it. Purpose-built apartment, definitely a lot of opportunities there. We haven't really spoken much on the student housing, which has so much of a scarcity. I know we are running out of time, so there are opportunities depending upon, and I can definitely take one-on-one, David, if anybody has direct questions.
Very good. Thank you very, very much, Ravi, for sharing your expertise with us. We have indeed put everybody's contact information. So if something you've heard somebody say and you want to talk to them further, please do reach out. Jerry, how about you? What are your thoughts on this? Help us wind this up.
Well, as far as the ideal investor, my ideal investor is somebody who wants to make between 8 and 15% and have their capital properly protected by real estate. So that covers a very wide gamut, which we do at Canadian Investment Service. Some of those opportunities we seek from third parties, other opportunities we create internally. As you know, we do real estate fix and flips where we'll buy a house, we'll refurbish it and knock it down, we'll rebuild it, and we'll do that as a joint venture with different investors. We'll do limited partnerships where we're with a general partner. So we create our own opportunities. We go to third parties and source them. But in general, anybody who wants to make 8 to 15% with their capital properly protected is a good client for us.
Okay, very good. And of course, people can call me too. Jerry and I have started working together on some private equity deals. As people may know, I've became licensed dealing rep with a great investment firm out of Hamilton, Huxton Black, and have some great opportunities there. And people love to invest in mortgages too. So you've had a lot of great information today, folks. Unfortunately, we didn't get to every single question, but we covered quite a bit, I think. And, you know, I appreciate all of you guests at home, attendees who have joined us. And once again, shout out to the panelists who've provided a lot of awesome information. And of course, to my good friend and co-host, Jerry Hogenhout. I think we've lost Perry Betel, unfortunately. But again, his information was on the screen. And in a couple weeks, Jerry and I are going to put our heads together. Maybe you'll see us out somewhere on a beach or a patio for the next installment of David and Jerry's Real Estate Cafe. Wasaga. That sounds like,
Let's go there.
that sounds like a plan. All right, awesome. Everybody, thanks so much. Have an amazing night, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Take care, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.
Ciao. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.